So it's that time of year when many of you have just celebrated the Puritan feast of Thanksgiving, and now many are in the process of putting up decorations, garlands, if you will. But I want to read you a story here about Paul and Barnabas in the book of Acts when they were in a pagan city. We're going to start here in Acts chapter 14. I'm going to start about verse 6. It says, "They were aware of it and fled into Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and into the region that lieth round about. And there they preached the gospel. And there sat a certain man at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, whom never had walked. The same heard Paul speak, who steadfastly beholding him, and perceiving that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, Stand upright on thy feet. And he leaped and walked. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, The gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter, and Paul Mercurius, because he was the chief speaker." Verse 13, "When the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands unto the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people, which when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard of, they rent their clothes, and ran in among the people, crying out, and saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God, which made heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein, who in times past suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he left not himself without witness, in that he did good, and gave us rain from heaven, and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. And with these sayings, scarce restrained they the people, that they had not done sacrifice unto them." In verse 19 we see, "And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he been dead." Now what we're reading here is because Paul had the gift of the apostles at this time. And over here, in verse 10, he had the ability to heal a man that was lame. And these pagans, when they seen that, they said the gods, notice this little g, had come down to us in likeness of men. And they called them Jupiter and Mercurius, which is also known as Mercury. And then look what they did. And then they brought oxen to do sacrifice and garlands for decoration, which could have also been something like wreaths they would have wore on their head. So here is pagan people using garlands to celebrate pagan false gods. And when Paul and Barnabas are grieved about this, rent their clothes and crying out and ask them why they are doing this, and rebukes them in verse 16, saying that God in times past suffered, which means permits, all nations to walk in their own ways. What he is saying is God now rebukes them, just the same as Paul and Barnabas. Paul also writes over in Acts chapter 17, verse 30, speaking of pagan ways and origins and traditions, said this ignorance God once winked at with the pagans, but now commendeth all men to come to repentance. And you can see, because the Jews who were against the preaching of Paul at this time stood up these pagans in this city, because he was rebuking them with their traditions, decided to stone Paul. So if you're wondering where your greens and your garlands and your little hanging, little dainty, little wreaths come from, It's from the pagans. Just like everything else that goes along with the Christmas holiday. Shocking, yes.